What's up, guys? We are live. We'll let some of the people come in. I just posted on Twitter, just posted to the Patreon, and we'll give some time for people to come in. But today, we're breaking down UFC 294, which should be a great card, which had a lot of change-ups last minute, but the co-main and the main event, yes, it's on short notice, but both are bangers. So for today's show, for today's live show, which we're trying to go live, yes, it says every Wednesday night, but I had all my predictions, I had all my picks, I have the time, so why not do it on a Tuesday night? So we'll be looking ahead for UFC 294. We will also be doing the UFC 5 giveaway. I'm giving away a free copy of UFC 5. And again, I'm going to wait for some more people to come in here. If they want to jump in the comments, we got some people in here now. What's going on, EJ? Welcome to the live show. Some more people strolling in here. But yeah, we are giving away a free copy of UFC 5. And the way that we're going to do that is you guys are going to have to make a prediction, which I'm going to give you those details in just a minute here. But if you guys are watching this after Tuesday, if you're here just for the fight breakdown, then I'm going to have all the timestamps in the description below. But if you're interested in the giveaway, I'll probably throw that in the timestamps too. So yeah, why not? It's what is it, like $80 for a free or for a copy of UFC 5, which is pretty insane. So I'll be giving that away for free, which is great. And the prediction that you guys are going to have to make, it's a little challenging. It's a little challenging. I know a lot of people out there, when they do giveaways, usually you're trying to guess the total amount of significant strikes that are taking place in one fight, but I'm going to change it up just a little bit. So we'll do that momentarily. We're also going to do our weekly cash giveaways. So just randomly, people in the comments, I'm just going to give away $10 at random to someone in the comments. And I do that every single week. Oh, what's going on? My guy, Tom. If you're trying to win a free copy of UFC 5, stay tuned because we are doing that pretty shortly. And you just got to make a quick prediction and leave it in the comments of the video. And if you're the winner, you're going to get a free copy, UFC 5. And we're going over UFC 294, the full card breakdown, every single fight. I'll give you my best bets. It's going to be a good time. And we're getting these out early on a Tuesday. That gives this time for the video to marinate. This is going to be a very popular card. People love the pay-per-view. Some huge names on it. Volkanovski stepping in on short notice. Hamza Chimaev finally, knock on wood, but making his return. So it's going to be a good time, guys. But all right. So real quick, if you want to win the free copy of UFC 5, you need to leave a comment down below. Let me know how many total takedowns there's going to be between the co-main event and the main event. So obviously in the co-main, we have Hamza Chimaev taking on Kamaru Usman, and we have Islam Makhachev and Volkanovski 2 in the main event. I want to know how many total takedowns are going to be recorded between these two fights. So if you guys can predict that, let me know in the comments. If you correctly predict that, you are going to win a free copy of UFC 5. That's the way it's going to work. Yes, you can go over. This is not The Price is Right. You can go over. It's just whoever at least predicts the exact amount of takedowns or gets closest to it, that's who's going to be the winner. And of course, if there is a tie, then I'm going to pick between the 2 or 3, however many people are tied, I'll pick at random. So we already have one comment in here, EJ going with 3 takedowns. Do you think there's only going to be 3 takedowns between the co-main and the main event? That would imply that we're going to see some very quick finishes. So, all right. So if you are watching live, then you know the deal. If you are watching this after the live, then you also know the deal. Real quick, before we get into the breakdown, just a quick plug to the premium content. I have a Patreon. You'll have access to my full card predictions. You'll have access to the confidence levels. You'll have access to all my fight notes. I have my best bets in there. I have a DFS guy who's giving out DFS content, post weigh-in show notes. I have an early line movement tracker. So really just this all-in-one tool that you'll have access to at a very affordable price. Make sure to check that out. Link is going to be in the description, and we can get right into it. So, starting out the night, we have Magomedov, Sharaputin Magomedov taking on Bruno Silva in what seems to be a pretty one-sided matchup here in terms of, looking at people on Twitter, listening to other people on YouTube. All the picks are backing the hype machine that is Magomedov, and for good reason. I mean, you take one good look at this guy. He is absolutely terrifying. Had one eye removed. He is partially blind in his right eye. So obviously that might affect him. He comes off the regional scene in Russia, but he is an absolute killer. He has over 90% finish rate. His kickboxing game specifically is absolutely ridiculous. It kind of reminds me of when Umar Nurmagomedov was kind of on the come up before he came to the UFC, and we were watching tape on him. And we were saying, holy crap, this guy's kicks are absolutely insane. They're flashy. They're dynamic. He's just got a ton of power. So for good reason, people are backing him. But again, you don't know what you're getting until you reach the UFC. He's now approaching a minus 250 price tag. So if we look at it real quick, he's minus 250. The comeback on Bruno Silva is plus 205. And really for Bruno Silva, generally speaking, if this was a couple of years ago, I think you could probably back this guy, but the record starts off very good. 3 straight wins, all by knockout in the UFC, and then somehow gets Alex Pereira, which is just a terrible draw. And he tries to mix in the wrestling, doesn't really work, and just gets doubled up in strikes on the feet. But he did go to decision. That is something to note. He did go to decision. He's actually never been finished by knockout or TKO. But with that said, we see it in the next fight against GM3. Cardio issues. GM3 did score a knockdown on Bruno Silva, which is never a good look. Bounces back after that with a win over Brad Tavares in round 1, but then gets absolutely destroyed by Brendan Allen, where he got pieced up on the feet. He got knocked down by Brendan Allen, who is typically a grappler, and ends up getting choked out. So really between GM3, between Brendan Allen, both those guys completely rocked him on the feet, and they just chose to basically choke him out instead of going for the TKO finish. So for as much as I think that Bruno Silva used to have a good chin, the durability used to go there. People will say he's never been finished by KO or TKO. I think that narrative is kind of false at this point. I think the chin has been shown to be cracked. And I think Shara Magomedov is going to get the job done personally. Usually I do have a rule where someone making their UFC debut, if they are this big of a favorite, if they have this much hype on their name and everybody's on them, it can be a little bit sketchy. But I'm going to take a flyer on it. I do have Magomedov winning by round 1 knockout. That's the official play. And I'll probably throw a couple props out there as well. So I'll be playing the KO. I'll probably be playing the round 1 KO as well, getting some decent value on there. But it seems like Magomedov is pretty much the clear pick, just fading the older 34-year-old Bruno Silva. Okay, on to the next one. We have Victoria Dudakova taking on Jinyu Frey. And if you guys didn't know, if this is your intro to UFC 294, you haven't checked the betting lines, you haven't really broken down these fights, this is the Chalk Zone. Throwback to a 2000s children's show called the Chalk Zone. This entire card is flooded with massive favorites that opened as big favorites, and now they're closing as even bigger favorites, which makes it very difficult to navigate and to find actual value in the betting lines. But you're going to see a theme here. You're going to see a pattern that we are probably going to be backing a lot of these chalky favorites. And I mean, it just makes sense here. You're getting Jinyu Frey, who is the plus 400 underdog, 11-9 pro record, 5'3". She is now 38 years old, and she has a 65-inch reach, taking on Dudakova, minus 550 as the favorite, 5'5", 24 years old, 67-inch reach. So right off the bat, we're seeing a height advantage. We are seeing a significant age advantage, 14 years difference. We know when you see an age gap this big, it favors the youth so much. I think it's probably like a 70% win rate. I think they have it when there's a gap of 8 years or greater. And, 38 approaching 40 years old, that is a bad look. Reach edge goes to Dudakova here. And what do we do with Jinh Yu Frey here? I mean, hasn't really had a good go of it in the UFC. So I think she only has 2 wins, one coming to Gloria DePaula, one coming to Ashley Yoder, who we just saw. Ashley Yoder didn't look as bad as I thought she was going to, but even Jinh Yu Frey goes in there and gets outlanded 91-88 against Ashley Yoder, who is primarily a wrestler and a grappler. So I don't really see it. After that, it's a split decision, a close split decision loss to Vanessa Demopoulos. Probably could have edged her and say she won that fight. But generally, we're seeing a pretty low volume of output here. She gets finished by Poliana Viana, and then she just loses a unanimous decision to Elise Reed, where she's able to mix in the wrestling every now and then, but overall just not that effective. And then when it's on the feet, she doesn't really have much to add there. So Dudakova, if Jinh Yu Frey is going to be looking for the takedowns, Dudakova is going to have the grappling edge here. She's just going to be so much more physically dominant than Jinh Yu Frey, who is very small. We see Jinh Yu Frey, believe she fought at 105 pounds before in her MMA career, whereas Dudakova, I think, has fought at a higher weight class coming down to 115. I think the size, the power, the physicality is going to be all Dudakova here. I will say I'm not completely sold. Dudakova minus 550 is a terrible price tag. I don't recommend that anyone really plays that. I probably will be throwing the fraud alert. I probably will fade her down the road unless she makes some vast, huge improvements because she is young. But right now, against Jinh Yu Frey, it's just not going to be there. I think Dudakova pretty much wins everywhere this fight goes. Jinh Yu Frey has been finished multiple times in her career, including a submission loss to Kay Hansen. So if that's the case, and I think Dudakova is going to take this to the ground and do it very often, she has most of her wins by submission. I think that's the way that you played this one. So I'm going with Dudakova to win, and I'm going with a round 2 submission. And real quick, guys, we will do our first cash giveaway. All right, so not too many people in the comments here, so it is going to be a 50-50 shot, and it is going to be my guy, Thomas C. Thanks for tuning in. $10 going your way. Just make sure to let me know on any of my social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I will make sure to send you $10. That's what we do here with the MMA Minute. We spread the wealth. So congrats to Thomas C. And that brings us to our next fight here. This is a good fight. It's an interesting fight. I have been back and forth a little bit in my head, and I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. So we have Nathaniel Wood taking on Naimov here. Wood opening, I think, around the minus 300 mark. He is now minus 340 as the favorite. Naimov plus 270. Nathaniel Wood, you're going to notice here, 5'6". They list his weight at 146 because that is where he used to fight. He is more of a natural featherweight. 30 years old, so he is hitting his athletic prime right now, and a 69-inch reach, taking on Naimov, who is 5'9". I'm sorry, I botched that one earlier. Nathaniel Wood, bantamweight typically, now fighting up at featherweight, and he is still small. Even at 5'6" down at bantamweight, you could say he was small. Now he's up at featherweight, where he is definitely small. And then Naimov here, 5'9", 29 years old, 70-inch reach. And you're seeing Naimov in his last fight took on Jamie Malarkey on short notice at 155. And he's got a ton of power without a doubt. And that translated very well when he actually knocked out Jamie Malarkey. So this one's a little bit sketchy for me because you have the guy Naimov coming from 155 down to 145. Nathaniel Wood, the smaller guy, typically 135, now up to 145. Not my favorite look here. And what I like about Naimov is, again, yeah, he is 29 years old. He is going to have the size, the reach, probably the power edge. He is training at Elevation Fight Team, which, if you don't know, that is out in the Rocky Mountains. That is where people go to get cardio. So this guy is actively working in a great gym, working on some of the holes in his game. And ultimately, I don't think he had the best go of it in his first 2 fights. He did lose his Dana White Contender Series fight to Colin Anglin, where he was outstruck 88-52. He was also taken down 3 times in that fight and controlled for 4 minutes. So that's one thing that I don't love. And then against Jamie Malarkey, yes, it was on short notice, up at 155, but he was getting pieced up in that fight. Jamie Malarkey was doing a great job staying on the outside, was able to mix in 3 takedowns, 2.5 minutes of control time. So really in his first 2 fights here, we've been seeing him lose the majority of it, but he did pull out that win. And this is just one of those sketchy fights where Nathaniel Wood should be better everywhere this fight goes. I have been very impressed with Nathaniel Wood. He's been getting it done at 145 against a good level of competition. Charles Rosa, I'm not going to say he was a good level of competition, but he absolutely smoked Charles Rosa, not surprisingly. But it's really the next 2 fights where he goes out there, beats Charles Jourdain, which has aged very well, outstriking him 97-86, and even mixing in 5 of his own takedowns and racking up 4.5 minutes of control time. Also against Andre Fili, he showed a lot of toughness in that fight. He got dropped. He was able to come back, win the fight. He also dropped Andre Fili because this guy has very slick striking and boxing on the feet, underrated power. Like I said, he does mix in the wrestling, and you see it early on in his career with the UFC. He actually came on a 3-fight winning streak in the UFC, all 3 by submission. So this guy really is a jack of all trades. He can get the job done multiple different ways. The one issue is the durability, the chin. I'm a little bit concerned. We just saw that he got dropped by Andre Fili, like I just mentioned, and he also has a knockout loss in the UFC coming to John Dodson, where John Dodson used to be very good, but that has not aged well. It seems like he has kind of figured out that whole thing, but going against Naimov, this is the way that I'm playing it. Nathaniel Wood is the pick, without a doubt. I think he is the better fighter. He's more proven, and I think he's going to win this fight as well, and I think he's going to do it by decision. I think the potential to finish is probably there, but I'm not going to force anything because Naimov does seem tough. The cardio is going to be a little bit better training at elevation, but I'm going to take Wood by decision, but you have to throw money on Naimov to win by knockout. I think that is a perfect hedge out because I do have Nathaniel Wood in a couple of parlays, but I see his path to victory being that knockout because he has the power and Wood has the durability and the chin question. So Wood is the official pick. I am still pretty confident in it, but I am going to just throw a little bit of money on that Naimov knockout just in case. Comment here, I've got to wait until all the prop lines come out to bet this card. Yeah, so if you are on Bet Online, they always throw out the props earliest. So if you're able to check that out, they have a ton of props out right now. Then usually all the other sports books, I would imagine, kind of follow along, see where their props opened, where they move to, and then I'm sure all the sports books just kind of mimic that and try to come up with the best lines that they can, which kind of stinks because you lose value that way. But BetOnline has some great props now. And yeah, you got to throw money on Naimov KO for sure. All right, so next up here, we have Mike Breeden taking on Jubli. Breeden plus 260 as the underdog. Jubli minus 330 as the favorite. Okay, so this is one of the rare times where I'm, 1, going to back Mike Breeden, and 2, just take a shot at an underdog that is at this level. He's plus 260 right now. I threw a bet on Mike Breeden. I believe I got in at plus 330. As soon as I started watching the tape, this is the thing with Mike Breeden. All right, let me just get into it real quick. If you were to just look at this on paper, okay, Mike Breeden, what has he done recently? So he comes into the UFC, not even that, Dana White's Contender Series, loses Dana White's Contender Series, okay? Gets a couple of bounce back wins, but we don't really look at that. It's on the regional scene. Comes into the UFC, gets starched by Alex Hernandez in round 1, gets pretty much washed by Natan Levy over 3 rounds, and then gets starched by Terrence McKinney also in round 1. So you look at him on paper, and he's 34 years old. It's a clear fade when you look at it that way. Then you look at his opponent, Anshul Jubli. What has he done recently? Well, he just won the Road to the UFC, which is a kind of like a fun tournament that they set up to kind of promote the Asian market, all the prospects out there, and whoever won that was going to get the contract, kind of like the Ultimate Fighter type of thing. Has a split decision win in that, and then he also gets the job done to earn his UFC contract against Jekka Sergi, where he got the knockout in round 2. And he's the much younger guy, trains at a good gym. He's got the size here. He's got the finish ability. So on paper, everyone looks at this, and this is a clear spot where, yeah, you probably should fade Mike Breeden. But when you actually look at the tape of Mike Breeden, it's not all that bad. It actually checks out pretty good. I think he is aggressive. I think he sets a good pace. He actually has some good power in his shots. I think he's shown decent wrestling. I think the takedown defense may be a little bit questionable, but his get-up game is pretty good. And I actually think his offensive wrestling is pretty good. Cardio, not the best, not the worst, but it's really the fact that he's been facing a high level of competition in the UFC. And not for nothing, but when you look at Anshul Jubli, the road to the UFC, as I just said, is for prospects in the Asian market. That is a relatively unsuccessful market in the UFC. I don't think we can really take too much from that. He's also fights out of India, which he is probably one of two, maybe three Indian fighters to ever fight in the UFC. I think that's also an untested market. So I think his come up on the regional scene is questionable. I think his come up on the road to the UFC is questionable. And he does look good, in those fights. I think his boxing looks pretty slick. He seems to have pretty quick combos in there. He also has a pretty good wrestling game. But I think defensively, he seems to be a little bit of a liability. I think he's a little bit too confident, a little bit too cocky as a striker in there. And I think that could, probably pay the price a little bit against Breeden, like I said, who is a good striker, who does have good power in his shots, who probably does have a decent wrestling game to at least push back on Jubli a little bit. And when you look at that price tag, I think that's where this comes into play. This is more a value play, where right now we're seeing, like I just said, Jubli is now minus 330. Breeden is plus 260. Earlier in the week, Jubli was like minus 425. It was absolutely insane. I had Breeden at plus 330. I had to throw money on it. So this is a weird spot where Jubli is most likely the correct side. The fact that the money's coming down makes him more playable. But I still think, even at plus 260, Mike Breeden is going to be worth a shot as an underdog on a super chalky card. I know on paper it looks terrible, but when you go back and you watch the tape on this guy, he's getting finished by absolute killers. He's facing a high level of competition, and I think his skill set is actually pretty good. So first underdog of the card, one of the only ones that I actually have on there. I am taking Mike Breeden to win this fight. Call me crazy, and I am going with decision. Call me crazy. I get it. I think a ton of people were on Jubli, but we're starting to see that money finally come back on Breeden. So at some point, Jubli probably becomes playable if it comes to like minus 250. I don't think it'll get there. But Breeden right now sitting at plus 260. Anything you got above that is great, but I'm taking Breeden, and I'm taking that by decision. Call me crazy. I usually don't back dogs that big, but on this card, we don't really have much of an option. Next fight up, we have Abu Azaitar taking on Cedric Dumas. Azaitar right now plus 185 is the underdog. 5'9", 37 years old, 76-inch reach, and taking on SD Dumas, who is minus 225 is the favorite. 6'2", 28 years old, 79-inch reach. So again, when we read off the physical attributes, massive size difference here in favor of SD Dumas. We have a massive age difference here in favor of SD Dumas. And of course, with that size, the physicality, we also have a 3-inch reach advantage for SD Dumas. Throw in the fact that, yes, Azaitar right now, 37 years old. This guy has been criminally inactive throughout his career. We see fought in 2015, fought 2016 2 times. Then there's a 2-year layoff. Didn't fight again until 2018, making his UFC debut. I don't know how that one happened. Then he takes 3 years off and fights Marc-Andre Barriault in 2021. Now he's taking an additional 2 years off, fighting right now against SD Dumas, and I hate that for him. I absolutely hate that for him. I hate this fight in general because I bought into the hype of SD Dumas, and he completely proved me wrong, where he borderline doesn't really belong in the UFC, but then he just picks up a win over Cody Brundage. So maybe we're starting to see some improvements. But overall here, Abu Azaitar is a powerful, physical fighter. He really just tries to load up on his shots, throw you against the cage, work in the clinch work, and he can do that for probably about 1 round. Then he starts to just absolutely gas out. He was able to throw up 108 significant strikes against Marc-Andre Barriault, but again, the cardio completely fell off a cliff, and Marc-Andre Barriault just doing what he does best. Power bar is his nickname. He just takes over as the fight goes on. He was able to find a round 3 finish. So that was 2 years ago. Do I think much has really changed for the 37-year-old Abu Azaitar? Absolutely not. So it pains me because I really don't think SD Dumas is all that good. He got absolutely worked by Josh Fremd and choked out in round 2. And then the win over Cody Brundage, I think, is even questionable because Cody Brundage took that on short notice. And Cody Brundage just didn't show up at all. He just wasn't looking to fight. He wasn't looking to win. He just showed up, and SD Dumas still wasn't able to finish him, landing only 17 strikes, but was able to rack up 11 minutes of control time. So really, the way that I can see this going a couple different ways, but overall, I wanted to throw money on Azaitar to fade Dumas, but it's not the spot to do it. Azaitar is terrible. He's super fadeable. He's old. He's inactive. He has bad cardio. Like, I don't see where he wins unless he gets a fluke knockout early in round 1. But that's the best round for SD Dumas as well, because I don't think his cardio is all that great. But he can give it his all in round 1. He does have some decent striking, some good power. He's got the length and that physicality that's pretty good. Defensively speaking, wrestling wise, I really don't think he's all that good, but his offensive wrestling isn't all that bad. And he does have some decent submissions in there. So the play is going to be SD Dumas, but confidence level couldn't be lower just because both of these guys are terrible in my opinion. But who's less terrible and who has more upside potential? It's clearly SD Dumas. Earlier in the week, he was minus 165. That was playable at minus 225. Don't parlay this guy. Maybe throw him as an inside the distance play. That's the best I can probably do. Personally, the official play is going to be Dumas to win round 2 submission. But again, terrible fight. Terrible fight. It's just the upside has to be on SD Dumas. The younger guy, by far, the much more active guy. And I guess he has the slightly better cardio. Maybe. Even if you can say that, I don't even know. But it's SD Dumas's to lose. Let's put it that way. All right. Next up, Javid Basharat taking on Victor Henry. Basharat is the minus 550 favorite. Victor Henry plus 400. Basharat is 5'9". He is 28 years old. He has a 69-inch reach taking on Victor Henry, showing that flashy 23-6 record, which looks pretty nice. But he is 5'7". He is 36 years old, and he has a 68-inch reach. And again, what are we supposed to do with a minus 550 price tag? Real quick, we do have a question here from Mr. Nate Brown. So I think the jet lag will affect Dumas. I used to put more stock into the fact that some of these guys have to fly halfway across the world. But I don't think Dumas was on short notice or anything. So I think he was really planning on this. But he is a green MMA fighter. I don't think he's really had to do something like this, travel this far with this weird of a time difference. So it is possible. It's really, if anything, it's just another reason to just fade the fight altogether. Just do not bet it. Just skip it. I still think Dumas probably wins. Can't really comment on the jet lag too much, but I imagine at this point, these guys have it down to a science. Back before when it was, COVID and you had to enter the bubble and, Dan Hooker was trapped from his homeland for 3 months on edge and had to live in the bubble. That obviously messed him up. But nowadays, I think they have that one cleared out. All right. So Javid Basharat, man, this guy is a certified A+ premium quality prospect. One of the best prospects you're going to see in the UFC right now. He has looked pretty much, dare I say, perfect so far. Very few flaws in his game. You're going to see here, statistically speaking, for 135, he's got good size. He's got good reach. Right now, he's landing 5.64 significant strikes per minute, and he's only absorbing 2.3. So he's landing at a very high clip, and defensively speaking, he's extremely effective. 66% striking defense, which is great. And then kind of on the flip side of that, how's his ground game? Well, it completely checks out. This guy is a very good wrestler, landing at least two takedowns on a 15-minute average, and he's doing that at a 57% accuracy, which is really good, and he's showing an 85% takedown defense. And he's facing a decent level of grapplers. Like, Tony Gravely is a very good wrestler. Tony Gravely went 2 of 13 on his takedowns, only had a minute and 43 of control, whereas Basharat, much more effective, much more efficient, 2 of 4 on his takedowns, pretty much doubling up the control time for the Basharat side. And then we see Mateus Mendonça. That didn't really age too well, but Mendonça, 2 of 11 on his takedowns, very low percentage there. And Basharat was 3 of 5 on his end and over double control time for him. So really at this point so far, we have a Dana White Contender Series win and we have 3 straight wins in the UFC where Javid Basharat has looked perfect. Everything he does is perfect. I think everyone's in agreement that this guy is going to be in the top 15 probably next year and is probably a future title challenger. So on the flip side, how do we look at this? Well, Victor Henry has had a very weird start to his UFC career where he came in as a massive underdog against Raoni Barcelos and he pulled it off, man. I don't know what happened. I'm a big Raoni Barcelos fan. The only thing I can say is that was probably the start of the slight decline of Barcelos, who at that point was like 35 years old. But Victor Henry, 181 significant strikes landed as opposed to 134 for Barcelos. That's insane. That is a extremely high level of output that he was throwing. He 30-27'd him across the board. 1 of 7 for takedowns for Raoni Barcelos. That's good, strong takedown defense from Victor Henry because Barcelos is a national wrestler with a good background there. But then after that, he throws up a complete bomb on Rafael Assunção, who dominates him across 3 rounds. Then he goes to a split decision, very close split decision, where he did pick up the win over Tony Gravely. So you kind of see the comparison there. They both fought Tony Gravely. Victor Henry struggled a little bit more. Basharat pretty much cruised through that one. But this guy, at his best, is throwing a ridiculously high level of output. I don't believe he's ever been finished in his pro career, which is pretty insane. Let me just double check that for you guys. Victor Henry, in 29 professional fights, has never been finished. He has 14 finishes himself, 8 by sub, 6 by TKO. So overall, you can say that he throws a high level of output. He's got good cardio. He's got good durability. He is well-rounded. It's just the fact that he's running into a guy in Javid Basharat who's also well-rounded and is probably just going to be better in every aspect of MMA. So the one thing to note here is that Victor Henry, as I just said, doesn't get finished. And Javid Basharat, at least in the UFC so far, is not a finisher. So over 2.5 rounds, that's something that I would definitely look at. And as far as a potential best bet goes, I'm going to throw in Javid Basharat to win by decision, -150. I have been burned on this prop time and time again, but I'm going to keep going back to the well. Murata was the last time out against Vanessa Demopoulos. It was also -150. Murata freaking won that fight. I will stand by it. I will die on that hill. But this is the bounce back. Javid Basharat is going to win the fight. He's not going to find the finish. -150 by decision. And that's the official play. All right, let's keep moving forward here. We have Muhammad Yahya taking on Trevor Peek in what should be an absolute barn burner. This should be extremely fun for as long as it lasts. Let's take a quick look here. Yahya, he's +122, but he actually opened as the favorite, which is shocking. Trevor Peek right now sitting at -145. He opened as the underdog, which again, very shocking in my opinion. Yahya making his UFC debut. He is 5'9", 29 years old, 73-inch reach. You have Trevor Peek, 5'9" as well, 28 years old, 70-inch reach. And we'll look at Yahya real quick. I'll just throw it out there right now. Watching the tape on this guy, I wasn't all that impressed. Primarily speaking, he is a striker. He does have 9 finishes of his 12 wins, 7 of those by TKO. He's a pretty good striker on the feet. He's more calculated, kind of picks his shots here and there, but he does crack, does have some good power in his hands. But we have seen the one thing here, if you see it here, he's been knocked out before and he's been submitted 2 times. So usually when you look at someone making their UFC debut. They got this nice shiny record, 15-0 or 15-1. Maybe that one loss comes to a guy who used to fight in the UFC. But when you see with Yahya here that he has 3 losses so far on the regional scene, and all 3 of those are by finish, that's a red flag to me. So he was submitted back in 2020, Darce choke to Dan Collins, rear naked choke to Gavin Hughes in Bellator, a little bit better competition there. Then he was knocked out on the Desert Force regional scene back in 2016. So that's not something that I like to see, and especially not something that I like to see when you are going against Trevor Peek, who is one of the most violent fighters on the entire UFC roster, because this guy doesn't care about anything except getting the job done and getting it done as quick as possible. This guy, 8-1. Let's go into his profile real quick. All 8 wins by knockout. That is a 100% finish rate. He did lose to Chepe Mariscal in his last fight out. I think that's aged pretty well because Chepe Mariscal has shown to be an absolute dog in the UFC, kind of turning a lot of heads there. So was able to survive. So that's one thing you're going to note, that not only is he an absolute killer on the feet, but his durability is very good. So before that, Dana White's Contender Series gets the round 2 knockout. And then against Eric Gonzalez, I mean, one of the most violent knockouts you're going to see. This guy goes in there throwing every strike possible. He doesn't care how technically sound it is, how fundamentally sound it is. He's throwing looping shots. He's throwing tomahawk strikes. This guy is the epitome of violence. And in this spot, especially when he opened as an underdog, that was the time to jump in. I was able to get in on Trevor Peek, -110, which feels very good. That feels about right. He's the type of guy where if he gets, right now he's -145. If he goes any higher past that -150 mark, I think he's unplayable at that point, just because he is like a kill or be killed type of guy. So he very well could lose by knockout. He could lose by decision just because he has no regard for his safety. But at the same time, I think in this specific matchup against a guy making his UFC debut who's been finished before, I'll take Trevor Peek all day. And I actually have another best bet here. Because of that violent nature that Trevor Peek brings, I think the under 1.5 is the play here, because Peek is going to go balls to the wall. Either he's going to get caught with something or he's going to catch Yahya with something. Under 1.5 right now, -110. I don't hate that at all. It almost feels too good to be true, where I can expect violence to happen in this fight. So -110, under 1.5, that's going to be a best bet. MMA Premium, my guy, what's good? Was able to tune in quick. Appreciate the comment, my dude. If you're looking to catch a free copy of UFC 5, make sure to loop back around once I finish this video. It'll be in the timestamps. You can see how you can win. So if you are watching this and you do want to win a free copy of UFC 5 that I'm just giving away, make a prediction. Leave it in the comments below. I need to know how many total takedowns we're going to get between the co-main event between Chimaev and Usman and the main event between Islam and Volk. Between those 2 fights, tell me how many total takedowns we are going to see. And if you are correct, then you could win a free copy of UFC 5. Okay, so, and then real quick, so the official prediction here is going to be Trevor Peek, round 1 knockout. The knockout prop for Peek isn't even worth playing. It's like +100. It's ridiculous. Just take Peek straight up, or just bet violence with the under 1.5. All right. Now we're on to the prelim headliner. Let's go. We are on to the prelim headliner. This is, I got to throw it in there. I like this fight a lot. This is a good one, man. This is Tim Elliott taking on Muhammad Mokaev. Tim Elliott, 20-12-1, +350 as the underdog. He is 5'7". He is 36 years old. He has a 66-inch reach, and he's taking on Muhammad Mokaev, who has a perfect 10-0 shiny record, 5'7", only 23 years old, and he has a 70-inch reach. This is a banger, and this is a banger because if you want to see a certified banger, it takes 2 to tango. We haven't seen the best of Muhammad Mokaev yet. It takes someone at a higher level to really bring it out of him. And who better to do that than Tim Elliott, the veteran, the savvy veteran that has been in the UFC for such a long time now. And it is always fun to see him in there, man. It's always fun to see Tim Elliott in there, man. He is just an absolute dog. He fights at an extremely high pace. He is super aggressive. He is super awkward. He has a very good wrestling game. The grappling, a little bit questionable here and there. The striking is very weird. But overall, this dude is an absolute animal. And at the very least, because again, we're getting a big price tag on Muhammad Mokaev. At the very least, I think we're going to see some answers in this fight. We are going to get some answers that we've been asking of Muhammad Mokaev. This happens to a lot of these prospects. How good are they? They've only been facing the Malcolm Gordons of the world, the Jafael Filios, the short notice replacements of the world, but we haven't seen the guy Muhammad Mokaev tested just yet, but we are going to see that. Look at this list. I'm scrolling down. Since 2012, Tim Elliott has been in the UFC. John Dodson, Joseph Benavidez, Demetrius Johnson, Devison Figueiredo, Aliskerov, Royval. This guy has been facing anybody and everybody at flyweight. And for a long time, I thought the career was done with this guy. He obviously had some outside the UFC things going on where there was a lot of question marks flying around as to where his head was going to be at. But he has put together a 2-fight win streak, one over Tagir Ulanbekov, which has looked very good. And then again, to Victor Altamirano, again, a guy, not the best, but he was looking pretty solid in the UFC himself until he ran into Tim Elliott. And really the name of the game here is that the fact that Tim Elliott has those wrestling chops. He went out there against Altamirano and just completely ragdolled him from the start. He was able to land 6 total takedowns, and he racked up 11 minutes of control time, which is just downright stupid. And then you watch him against Tagir, which is a good comp here because Mokaev is a guy who is going to take the fight to the ground. And I think the scrambling is going to be pretty insane. And Tim Elliott was able to do 3 of 9 of his takedowns, only a minute of control time. Tagir was able to land only 2 of 10 of his takedowns with 5 minutes of control time. But it was Tim Elliott who was able to land a knockdown on the feet and was able to put up 79 significant strikes of his own. So Tim Elliott is able to perform at a high level against a high level of competition. But I will say in this fight specifically, I do think he's going to get steamrolled. I do. And I was kind of just talking Tim Elliott up a little bit. I do think he is going to push Mokaev for a certain amount of time, at least obviously in round 1. I think it's going to be an insane round 1 because Tim Elliott's just going to get to action and he's going to get to action quick. But a couple things that I don't love about Tim Elliott, I would say 1, I think the cardio is starting to show a little bit. I think round 3, Victor Altamirano fight, he was starting to slow down. It's because he's pushing such an insane pace that he's not able to do that at age 36, all 3 rounds like he used to be able to do. I also think on the feet, he's extremely hittable. So he does show a decent striking defense. He does have a positive striking differential, which is good to see. But anytime the fight was standing against Altamirano, which was all of like 4 or 15 minutes, Altamirano was piecing him up. And it looked like Tim Elliott was not wearing that very well. So I think his striking defense is a little bit suspect. I think his cardio is a little bit suspect. And when you look at it, overall durability for Tim Elliott, he's been finished 6 of 12 fights professionally. 5 of those by submission. 5 of those by submission. That does not bode well when you're going against a guy, Muhammad Mokaev, who has shown nothing but excellent A-plus tier grappling. So far, 4 wins in the UFC. 3 of those are coming by way of submission. Cody Durden ended that fight within 1 minute. Came out aggressive with a flying knee, was able to get the guillotine in there. Against Malcolm Gordon, that was a pretty easy fight for him. And then Jafael Filio, who actually had him in a nasty knee bar. I don't know how Mokaev did not tap, but not only did he not tap, but I think he tore his ACL and was able to actually turn that fight around and get the submission win deep into round 3. So have we seen the best of Mokaev? No, he's 23 years old. He's only going to be getting better. I think he's going to be training with absolute killers. I think physically, this guy's going to be completely dominant. He's jacked up for the 125 division. And I just think Tim Elliott, 36 years old, durability has never really been a positive thing for him. He fights like an absolute psycho. I think these two are going to go back and forth. We're going to get an absolute war. But as this goes past that 1.5 mark, I think Mokaev becomes live. And I think he becomes live to find a submission win. So, official prediction is going to be Mokaev. I'm going with a round 3 submission. And I have another best bet here. The best bet here is I do think Tim Elliott is going to be able to push this into rounds 2, potentially to round 3. So I'm going to go with Mokaev round 2 submission and Mokaev round 3 submission. The round 2 sub pays plus 700. The round 3 sub pays plus 1,000. Mokaev fighting close with Johnson scares me. Yeah, Johnson is interesting because he's kind of a giant for the division. He's big for the weight class. But historically, he hasn't really shown great takedown defense. So Mokaev was able to go in there and land 12 takedowns, 11, almost 12 minutes of control time. But that just means Charles Johnson was able to get back up multiple times. I think Charles Johnson that's what he does. I mean, he's huge for the division. I think his get-up game is very solid. Tim Elliott, on the other hand, the scrambles are going to be wild, man. The scrambles are going to be wild, but Tagir did have 5 minutes of control time on him. Let's see, who else was able to wrestle him a little bit? Brandon Royval was able to kind of make quick work of him, rack up 2 minutes of control time. So, yeah, Tim Elliott's not an easy guy to hold down by any means, but I do think he's going to tire as the fight goes on. This is primarily probably going to take place on the ground, where both guys are going to exert a lot of energy. And if you're asking me who's going to have the better cardio and durability, it's going to be Mokaev 9 out of 10 times. So I do love the Tim Elliott, style where he's just awkward and hard to handle. But overall, I don't think he's going to win this fight. I think this is Mokaev's to win. Unless Mokaev takes this fight super lightly, which is possible because he is 23 and he's super cocky. But if he takes this fight lightly, Tim Elliott's not the guy to do that against. So I don't see that happening. I think Mokaev is going to be ready to go. We have some people in the comments here. Mokaev by sub for sure. That's what I'm thinking. It's just, statistically speaking, Tim Elliott has been subbed so many times and his wrestling is good, but eventually he just puts himself into a bad position. And Mokaev is an absolute killer on the ground with very good grappling and very good submission. So I think Mokaev is the move. And on the feet, that's where I'd like to see some of the improvements. You see here that the most strikes that we've ever seen from Muhammad Mokaev in a fight is 21. And he's gone to round 3 times now. So that's no bueno. 1.14 landed to 0.87 absorbed. Like, he's not absorbing anything because he's just taking you down and controlling you. And again, he's not landing too much because he's taking you down. Hasn't really shown the ground and pound, but he's just controlling you and looking for submissions. So, yeah, I mean, I don't. If you take Tim Elliott as an underdog, that's totally fine. I can see where you're coming from. Money is coming in on him. I think Mokaev opened minus 500. So Elliott is getting some money as the underdog. Again, he's another one of these guys like Darren Elkins. He is going to fight for your money. He is the definition of a dog. So to take him against Mokaev, who I want to say is still relatively unproven, I personally believe in the guy. I think he's probably a future champ, but I'm throwing Mokaev probably in a couple of parlays, especially if this price keeps coming down. And do I think he gets finished by Tim Elliott? Absolutely not. So if anything, Tim Elliott by decision, probably a decent hedge out there, but you're getting a good plus money on Tim Elliott as it is as an underdog. But I'm throwing Mokaev in there, and I think he's going to get it done by submission. All right, guys. So we are now headed into the main card here of the pay-per-view for UFC 294. Real quick, guys, if you want to check out the Patreon, my premium content, you'll have access to all my full card predictions, my confidence levels, over-under leans, fight notes, best bets on the card. I got a DFS guy. I got post-weigh-in show notes, just early line movement tracker, just all these tools and things so that you guys can make the best betting decisions throughout the entire week, every week for all UFC events. So description is below for the Patreon, and it's a very affordable price. I'm not charging $100 a week, $100 a month. That's insane. Yeah, Mokaev only landed like 11 strikes in the Johnson fight. It was honestly one of the worst fights I've ever seen. Yeah, that's his problem, man, is that he is just going in there, grappling guys. We're not seeing any ground and pound. He's looking for submissions, and he just gives you no room to work. So every time Charles Johnson got up, Charles Johnson couldn't land any strikes because he was right back down to the mat. And unfortunately, that is a way that you can win fights. Eventually, it's going to bite him in the ass. Maybe it's Tim Elliott that does it. But I just think Mokaev is, again, massive age difference here. Mokaev is just going to get better and better and better every step of the way for the next almost 10 years. Elliott, we know exactly what he's going to do. He is an absolute dog, but he's been finished multiple times. All right. So we have Said Nurmagomedov taking on Muin Gafurov. Nurmagomedov, no relation to the Khabib family. He's just a Nurmagomedov who happens to also be from Russia. And I also think he's from Dagestan. So Said, 17-3, 5'8", 31 years old, 70-inch reach, taking on Gafurov, who is 18-5, 5'7", 27 years old, and 68-inch in the reach department. I got a weird, sketchy feeling about this one. Gafurov's just one of these guys who we just haven't seen it yet. I think there's probably been a little bit of hype on his name. People certainly see the OV at the end and probably expect big things in the grappling realm, but we haven't really seen that at all. The wrestling is decent, but I don't think it's absolutely dominant. We even saw that in his Dana White Contender Series fight. He was able to land 5 takedowns against Chad Anhelinger, which is not a good win. That does not age well. He was able to get 7 minutes of control time, but it was Chad who was able to score the knockdown, who was able to outland Gafurov. And it's really just Gafurov's striking is very suspect, in my opinion. He's just one of these guys who goes in there, wants to finish the fight early. He's just looking to go in there and just wing crazy hooks left and right. And as far as his wrestling goes, I don't think his entries on the takedowns are all that good. And that's on a very small sample on Dana White's Contender Series against a guy who just wasn't really cut for the UFC in Chad Anhelinger. And then he goes out there against John Castaneda. He gets taken down 3 times himself and gets tripled up on control time. And he gets completely, numbers wise, it was 61-40 for Gafurov, but it was Castaneda again who scored the knockdown. So that's now 2 times that Gafurov has been knocked down. And now his takedown defense is showing 62%. I don't think his offensive wrestling is all that good. I don't think his cardio is all that good. He's just a sloppy finisher. And because you will go in there and we'll see right here, his finishing upside is pretty big. 17 of 18 wins by way of finish. But he's just not getting it done at the lower levels that we want to see, because we're talking about Castaneda and we're talking about Anhelinger. Those guys, I don't think are even close to Said Nurmagomedov, in my opinion. I think Said Nurmagomedov is actually pretty damn good. I know he's sometimes not the most exciting guy to watch. He's, as opposed to some of the other Nurmagomedovs out there and people who fight in that camp, usually they're boring wrestlers. He's actually one of these guys who's a very good technical tactician, sniper type striker on the feet. And then he also just happens to have decent offensive wrestling himself. And he also happens to have a ridiculously good submission game as well. So very underrated in that regard, where he's got 9 finishes, 4 by TKO, 5 by submission. And really the body of work comparing the two is not even close. So far, 1 loss in Dana White's Contender Series, 1 loss in the UFC for Gafurov. Said Nurmagomedov has been winning just about every fight in the UFC. His only 2 losses are coming to Raoni Barcelos, a fight where he outstruck him 55-42, and a loss to Jonathan Martinez, where he actually outlanded Martinez 47-38 and had 3 takedowns. You could probably make a small argument that Said actually won that fight, and that's aged very well because Jonathan Martinez looks like an absolute killer in there. And some of the other wins on here that Said has, Ricardo Ramos, that's a pretty good win. Cody Stamen, that's a pretty good win. Douglas Silva de Andrade, that's a pretty good win. And Sayudikub Kakramanov, that's a pretty good win. This guy is getting it done at a high level, and he's really just very well-rounded. Maybe you could say his takedown defense is a little bit suspect, and maybe durability and cardio-wise, as the fight goes into round 3, maybe he slows down just a little bit. But overall, and I'll also say that striking-wise, his numbers can be a little bit low. I wish he was a little bit more active. I wish he had a little bit more sense of urgency. But overall, I think he's kind of like the Nathaniel Wood and Naimov fight, I think Saeed is just vastly better than this guy in pretty much every aspect. It's just the fact that Gafurov, like I said, goes in there, loads up on his shots. I think the KO is a potential win, a winning path to victory for the Gafurov side. But overall, I think Saeed is safe to play. Personally, I think he's going to go in there, get the job done by decision. But, you know, Gafurov has been tough. He has never been finished in his MMA career. And Saeed, we've just seen it before. We got decision to Jonathan Martinez, decision to Douglas Silva de Andrade, decision with Raoni Barcelos, split decision in his UFC debut. Like, he does show some finishing upside, but I think the decisions have been mixed in there as well. And Gafurov just never having been finished. It's a little sketchy for me, but maybe you get the value that way. But overall, I think Saeed wins this one. But it's another one where I think you have to sprinkle Gafurov by knockout just in case. Saeed taught me if a Dagestani fighter is a wrestler, they have a good shot. If they are a striker, it's a coin flip. Yeah, that's maybe true. I mean, we're going to talk about another guy who kind of fits that bill. But yeah, so to Joey saying he did not know that Gafurov has never been finished in 18-5 record, 5 losses, 0 by finish, meaning he went to decision 5 times. So he has been dropped a couple times. That's worth noting. But overall, he has not been finished. But maybe you do go in there and you throw a little bit of sprinkle on a Saeed inside the distance prop. Maybe that pays out pretty well. But yeah, overall, man, I just think Saeed's the play here. And at minus 220, it's one of the most playable fights on this card. And honestly, that's a little sketchy to me. For some reason, this feels like it should be more of like a minus 300. With that Nurmagomedov name, I thought people would be steaming this line, but it really hasn't moved all that much. So I'm getting a little bit of weird vibes here, but overall, side by decision for me. All right, next up, Aliskerov taking on Warlley Alves. And guys, this is one of the biggest lopsided fights you're going to see on the entire card. This was supposed to be Aliskerov taking on Imavov. He was supposed to fight Imavov. That fight gets scrapped. I thought that was actually going to be a very good fight. I probably would have taken Imavov in that fight. But instead, we're getting Warlley Alves, who's making this fight on short notice, who is moving up a weight class, who only shows that he's 32 years old. But this guy looks like he should probably be 42 years old. It is not a good look for Warlley Alves in recent memory. So just looking at Warlley Alves real quick, you got to mention it because it is absolutely hilarious. But back in the day, this dude used to be an absolute killer, made his UFC debut back in 2014. He has a submission win over Colby Covington. That is absolutely insane. That is the pinnacle, the peak of his career. That's just insane. He's also faced guys like Kamaru Usman. Barbaraina's on there. That's a decent name to have on there. James Krause. Randy Brown. So he's generally facing a pretty high level of competition. But there's just something about it where this guy has just aged pretty poorly, in my opinion, outside of what appears to be a fluke win over Mounir Laziz, where he just came out guns blazing, throwing ridiculous shots, was able to score a quick round 1 knockout. Hasn't really looked all that well. Randy Brown was able to go in there and handle him pretty easily. So the one thing with Alves is that he does have a solid ground game. I will say that. Definitely has a lot of submission upside with him, and he's definitely dangerous on the feet as well. So I'm thinking like round 1 is definitely his path to victory. But against Randy Brown, goes out there, looks decent early on, and then just completely gets flipped on his head, and Randy Brown takes over, finds the submission. Jeremiah Wells goes in there, is able to knock him out in round 2, and then goes to a weird split decision with Nicholas Dalby where he gets outlanded 119-66. Does land a takedown of his own, but wasn't able to do much with it. So really in this fight, I just don't see it going well for him. Like I mentioned, it's really round 1 for Alves. That is, yes, exactly. Joey's in here in the comments. He is a round 1 bust type of guy. That's exactly right. So what you have to do, because I know people are going to love Aliskerov here. I love doing hedge outs. That's just what I like to do because I like to throw 2-fighter, 3-fighter parlays in there. And I like to just throw those kind of crazy headshots that pay +5, +600. So you can sprinkle a little bit on there and kind of save your ass. So the way to do it is to throw a round 1 Alves. But outside of that, he's going to completely fall apart. And Aliskerov is just going to dominate this guy. So just quickly looking at Aliskerov, I don't want to say that he's fraudulent, but -600 is ridiculous. And the guy is seemingly a finished machine. But I think defensively speaking, he's a little bit of a liability. When I went back and watched some of the tape, Dana White's Contender Series, I think he's got really no regard for his defense. Mario Souza was able to land a number of very strong low kicks that I think eventually probably would have eaten away at him. But outside of that, against Phil Hawes was landing some massive body kicks against him where he just wasn't doing anything to correct those mistakes. He was getting pieced up on the feet a little bit. And then with Phil Hawes, he was able to land that kill shot, get him out of there. And then with Mario Souza, as soon as he took the fight to the ground, he was able to find a round 1 Kimura. So I do think at some point this guy is going to be fadeable because they are pushing him. He was supposed to face Imavov, and I think down the line they're thinking a Chimaev rematch is probably in the cards. But I got to go with Aliskerov to get the job done, just strictly because Alves is round 1 or bust. After that, he's going to fall off a cliff. I think Aliskerov is going to be live for a finish. That's the way that I'm going to play it. And yeah, so for a best bet, Aliskerov inside the distance is going to be one of my favorite parlay pieces on the entire card. It's -275. The guy has shown to be a killer, especially in his last few fights. Overall, has 10 of 14 wins by way of finish. And Alves, like I said, is just not showing anything to me outside of round 1 recently. And he's taking this fight on short notice, up a weight class, flying halfway around the world, where Aliskerov is going to have home field advantage, if you want to call it that. And yeah, Aliskerov inside the distance is one of the best parlay pieces for me. I'm throwing Aliskerov round 2 and Aliskerov round 3 in there. Round 2 pays out +400 and round 3 pays out +700. Those are a couple of bets that I'm definitely looking at. Yeah, so that's the thing, Joey, here. I think Phil could have won if he wasn't chinny. That's pretty much the name of the game for Phil Hawes at this point. Dude is an absolute savage wrestler. Very good background in wrestling. Jacked up for the division. Huge power in the hands. But the dude can't take a punch, man. He's got that. There's a button on the chin. As soon as he gets hit, it goes down. So he's unfortunately just one of those guys who could be a world beater, could be top 15. But he just doesn't have the durability, doesn't have the chin. And now I think he's a little bit too old at this point. So, yeah, Phil could have been a problem. So officially, I am going with Aliskerov to win by round 2 submission. But beware the Alves early onslaught. I'll just say that. Famous last words, right? All right, next up, 3 fight. Oh, dude, let's go. Norton MMA is in the comments. If you guys don't know, and you maybe don't know because Norton MMA has been inactive, he has been, just out of commission, MIA for a long time, but he is in the chat. He is an absolute legend. He's a longtime friend of the show. Used to have the best breakdowns on YouTube out of anybody who ever made videos about UFC breakdowns. This guy killed it. Yeah, agree with Phil Hawes. He had all the tools, man. He had all the tools. Maybe the cardio wasn't the best, but he had a win over Imavov. I think people kind of forget that, and that has aged very well, in my opinion. So yeah, Norton, looking forward to seeing who you have on the card as well. But we are working our way to Magomed Ankalaev taking on Johnny Walker. We have Magomed Ankalaev right now -350 as the favorite. 6'3", 31 years old, a 75-inch reach, taking on Johnny Walker, 6'6", also 31 years old. That's kind of shocking to me. I didn't realize that they are the same age. I kind of still assume that Johnny Walker is just a kid, 25, 26 years old on the come up, but I guess disagree there, sir. Thanks for the kind words. Listening intently, still in active vids, but all here watching as always. I love that. Yeah, always appreciate you. If you can jump into the live whenever you can, I always appreciate your insight and yeah, looking forward to seeing who you have on these last few fights. So, yeah, getting into it, Ankalaev minus 350, Johnny Walker plus 275. And in my opinion, in my humble opinion, Magomed Ankalaev is the best 205er on the planet, on the UFC roster. I think he probably should be the current champion right now, defending his belt. But obviously, that fight with Jan Blachowicz was that just kind of a train wreck. I guess that's one way you could put it. But before that, Anthony Smith handles him. Thiago Santos, for the most part, handles him. As that kind of gets into rounds 4, rounds 5, Thiago Santos did have that small scare where he was able to get a knockdown on Ankalaev. But overall, Ankalaev pretty much dominated that fight. Flixie YT giveaways. Real quick, I'll do another cash giveaway after this video. And then if you want to win a free copy of UFC 5, in the comments, let me know how many total takedowns there's going to be in the co-main event and the main event combined. If you can tell me, correctly guess that, you could win. So yeah, as I was saying, I thought he pretty much dominated the Santos fight, pretty much dominated Volkanovski, pretty much had his way with Nikita Krylov. Iwan Kutelaba 2 times. They ran that one back for some reason. He's just looked perfect. He's looked perfect. The only blemish on the record is Paul Craig pulling out a literally a last second triangle choke submission win, which is insane. Norton in the comments, you think Ankalaev lacks that killing, stinging blow to his fights? I feel he doesn't get out of the third gear. I want to see him max out. Exactly. So that's going to be one of my points here is that look at the Jan Blachowicz fight. Jan Blachowicz is at the top of the division. He's one of the best fighters at 205, certainly one of the most underrated, especially when it comes to striking. And what happened in the first couple of rounds? Ankalaev just sat there. Jan Blachowicz just blasted away at the legs, landing body shots, doing what he does best. He's a very good striker early on. Ankalaev just stood there, frozen, didn't know what to do. And then if you kind of dig in a little bit deeper, as the fight goes on, I don't know if it was his corner or whoever was probably like, dude, you got to fucking start getting going because nothing is happening right now. And as soon as he started being aggressive, landing more strikes on the feet, and more specifically, mixing in the wrestling, when he started mixing in the wrestling, that's when he started having success against Jan Blachowicz. He started to wear on him, especially in rounds 4 and 5. I believe one of those was a 10-8. And that's where he just looked like a minus 500 favorite at that point. So, yes, to Norton's point, he doesn't have that killer instinct. It's like the Said Nurmagomedov effect, where these guys are so comfortable on the feet, but they're so defensive and tactical that they lack this killing ability. And I absolutely hate that. So, for me, yes, it is a massive red flag for Ankalaev, but how could he possibly be going into this fight thinking anything else but, well, this is 3 rounds. I need to get going, and I need to get going early. So, yeah, Norton nailed it. He's got to mix it up. Exactly, because he can do that. He's phenomenal on the feet. He is not your typical Dagestani wrestler. He has the wrestling in his back pocket, but he's also a phenomenal striker on the feet. So, for him to put it all together and to add in that added layer of being aggressive, I think, to me, that makes him, on his best day, if he's able to do all of those things, he beats anybody at 205. And I'm not going to say I don't think it's close, but I just think he is the best 205er on any given day when he can put it all together. Yeah, honestly, Magomed should be champion right now. Walker is going to stuff the takedowns and land elbows or knees and get a KO. All right, so I'll get into the prediction here, but I think Ankalaev is going to win this fight. I think Johnny Walker has a ceiling. I think he's kind of being fed to the wolves here, to be honest. I think the UFC... You know what? No, I shouldn't say that. He's not being fed to the wolves because the UFC wants him to win. The winner of this fight is going to be very close to be getting a title shot. We're in a little bit of a backlog because Jamal Hill's on the sidelines, but the winner of this is surely going to be in line very quickly. Johnny Walker has a ton of hype. He has a ton of entertainment factor, especially compared to Ankalaev in his last few fights. So, yeah, the UFC wants Johnny Walker to win. They want this guy to contend for a belt because he is very exciting. But in my opinion, I just don't think he's really all that good. I think, we've kind of seen it where he had flashes of brilliance early on. right? And then he opens as a minus 300 favorite to Corey Anderson, and he gets absolutely destroyed. And then he fights Nikita Krylov, and he gets absolutely destroyed. Worked on the ground by Krylov, who had 3 takedowns in 11 minutes of control time. Bounces back against Ryan Spann, even though Ryan Spann probably could have won that fight and finished that fight. Thiago Santos stands still for 5 rounds like a frozen statue, doesn't know what to do, and loses that fight. And then he gets knocked out by Jamal Hill. So I kind of think that when he gets to a certain level of competition, he falters. But Ion Cutelaba handles him. Paul Craig handles him. Anthony Smith, an older Anthony Smith out of his prime, handles him. But in this particular matchup, if Ankalaev just puts it all together, mixes in the wrestling, I think he's just going to win probably what is a boring decision. In my opinion, hats off to Johnny Walker, had a career resurgence, has looked so much better, but I just think Ankalaev is just a level ahead, and I really do believe if he just mixes in that wrestling, I don't think it's really going to look all that good. Unless, Walker's able to pull a submission off his back like a Paul Craig was able to do. Maybe that's a path to victory, but, you don't really see it here for Johnny Walker. He's usually just knocking dudes out left and right with the elbows, the spinning back fist, the flying knees. But we'll see, man. We'll see. Yeah, so Walker is a good fighter. Ankalaev is a great fighter. That's borderline. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And this is MMA. It's been a crazy year. I've seen Kamaru Usman get finished. It is possible. It is possible. Things happen. Crazy things happen. People get finished. Of course, Johnny Walker can do it. Tom C. Don't forget his cool KO dance. When he gets the KO and he goes in there and does the worm, 50-50 shot that he's popping his shoulder back out. This guy's an idiot, man. He's too cocky and confident for his own good. But he has toned it down a little bit since then. So I will say he's looked a lot better. But it is possible if he gets that knockout, you're going to see the worm. Yeah, I could see an Ankalaev finished. I mean, Johnny Walker, durability-wise, definitely not all that there. Don't you forget Usman KO. Yeah. I mean, probably the best day for English UK fans ever, right? Probably has to be the best moment ever. Absolutely insane. But I have seen Kamaru Usman, a pound-for-pound great, an all-time great fighter, never been finished before, get knocked out. Can Johnny Walker knock out Ankalaev? Sure. I think Paul Craig was going to submit him off his back with 1 second left to go in round 3. I did not. Things happen. But statistically speaking, Ankalaev gets the job done 70% of the time, and he's going to win. Yeah, I'll give you that. Bisping can, I'll give you that. First champion, Bisping to do it. The comeback story. I'll give you that. It's a very close second. And Mokaev will be your very close third. Or Tom Aspinall. We'll see. All right. Sweet. All right. Let's do a quick cash giveaway. We're giving out another $10 here. We're giving out another $10 to someone in the comments who is going to be the lucky guy. What are the chances? My guy, Flixie YT, asked if there were any giveaways, and he's going to get $10. So all you got to do is tell me, social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you can find me. Just let me know that you won $10, and I'll make sure that goes your way. That is our last $10 giveaway for the night. And we are getting into the co-main event and the main event. Here we go. Kamaru Usman taking on Khamzat Chimaev in the co-main event. Kamaru Usman is a hero. He is stepping in on short notice. Khamzat Chimaev was supposed to fight Paulo Costa, which I think Paulo Costa got a little bit lucky here. Now he can back out of the fight with a legitimate excuse. People won't give him too much shit, but he avoids an absolute train wreck fight with Khamzat Chimaev, where I think Chimaev was going to completely expose him, but that's neither here nor there. We have Kamaru Usman taking on Khamzat Chimaev. He has the underdog. We have 6 feet for Kamaru Usman, 36 years old, 76-inch reach. We have Khamzat Chimaev, 6'2", 29 years old, 75-inch reach. And, oh, man, what a fight. Because on paper, this should be, you know, one of the best fights that we've ever seen. This is one of the closest matchups that we have ever seen. Um, with Boers, you know, maybe we go into him first, but with Khamzat Chimaev here, he's been pretty inactive, man, and that's been pretty unfortunate. I think another weird thing here, we just gotta throw it out there. I don't know the specifics behind it, but Khamzat Chimaev, you see it right here, UAE. He now identifies with the United Arab Emirates, which is where the fight is taking place in Abu Dhabi. Why did that happen? I have no idea why that happens, but that's got to throw some sort. My antennas went up for some reason. That's got to mean something. I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments. But Khamzat Chimaev, really a ridiculous run in the UFC. It started out very fast. He comes out destroying everybody on the ground. No one's landing a significant strike on this guy. To the point where, you know, he gets pushed a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and you still have all those question marks in your head. Is he good? How good is he? Knocks out GM3 at 185, takes on the Leech at 170, subs him in round one. But it wasn't until that Gilbert Burns fight where we actually learned what this dude was made of. And obviously, credit to Gilbert Burns, outlanded Chimaev 119 to 108. I think one of the tales of the tape there, too, is that Chimaev didn't really have too much success on the ground. The takedowns, yes, 2 of 3, but only 2 minutes of control time. Nothing really to go off of there. He did stuff all of Gilbert Burns' attempts, 0 of 5 for Gilbert Burns. But Gilbert Burns was able to land some massive shots on Khamzat Chimaev because this guy, I think when he's not able to get the wrestling going, I don't think he has a game plan. I think his game plan is just to go in there, try to ragdoll you. If it stays on the feet, he's just throwing whatever he possibly can to get the job done. His striking is actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So we at least got the answers that we wanted, that he beats a guy like Gilbert Burns, who's very tough, very durable, hard to get out of there. And he not only did it with partially the ground game, but mostly his striking, which I thought looked pretty good. He mixes it up well with a combination of kicks, straight punches. He was throwing a vicious uppercut every chance he could get. So, I like Chimaev's striking. It's not amazing, but he is super aggressive and just puts on an insane pace. And the cardio wasn't great, but for 3 rounds, it checked out at least. And then against Kevin Holland on short notice, crazy card, goes out there and just dominates Kevin Holland, gets the submission. So now we're kind of left with, we haven't seen Khamzat Chimaev in over a year. He has officially chosen 185 as his home, and he's taken on Kamaru Usman, who most notably, as we just mentioned, was knocked out against Leon Edwards after dominating 4 out of 5 rounds. But then, you know, you maybe throw in the fact that Leon was fighting at elevation. He wasn't used to it. That didn't really go. And then in the next fight, Leon against Kamaru Usman, Leon just put on a hell of a performance. 415 for Kamaru Usman on his takedowns, only 5 minutes of control time. That's not a typical Kamaru Usman line. And then on the feet, it just wasn't even close. It was 120 significant strikes for Leon Edwards against 87 for Kamaru Usman. So there's a lot of things here to unpack, but I have to do it. I have to throw it in there. With Kamaru Usman, one, he is taking this fight on short notice. He is going up a weight class. He is flying halfway across the world. He is now, 36 years of age? Is that correct? I just want to double check that real quick. I believe he is 36 years old. Yep, he is now 36 years old. He's now riding a 2-fight losing streak where we have started to see the cracks in the armor. Leon Edwards in round 1 was able to take down Kamaru Usman rather easily and control him. And of course, now Kamaru Usman has been knocked out. And now Kamaru Usman not only just had a fluke knockout loss, but he got worked over 5 rounds, in my opinion. I thought Leon pretty much dominated that fight. I think that's got to take a hit to his confidence. And Leon was also able to stuff the majority of the takedowns. So with a lot of those factored into this, I think it's Khamzat Chimaev. Man. I just think specifically in a 3-round fight, right? Do I have that correct? I believe this is a 3-round fight. I think that's going to be fluke knockout loss. All right. No. Misspoke on that one because Leon set it up. I will give you that. But it was just something that, you know, Kamaru was dominating the majority of that fight. and then catches an L at the very end. Whereas in the next fight against Leon, it wasn't just that knockout that got the job done. It was that Leon was able to pretty much dominate and control the majority of that fight. So two separate types of losses. I think both are going to go against Kamaru Usman's confidence level. So, yeah, it was a sniper shot. Absolutely. But I believe this fight is going to be at 3 rounds. And I think that is going to benefit Khamzat Chimaev greatly here because it just allows him to have no regard for his cardio. He doesn't have to set a pace where he's consistently thinking about round for round going through all 5 rounds. It's going to be a hectic, onslaught, aggressive, just moving forward nonstop, laying it on Kamaru Usman for at least 2 of those 3 rounds. And I think that goes one of 2 ways. Either he dominates 2 rounds and he wins on the decisions, on the judges' scorecards by decision, or personally, I think he could get a finish in here. I think Usman's stand-up game has looked a lot better. But when you go back and look at it, Colby Covington was able to rock this guy. He was able to, box this guy on the feet for 5 rounds. And I don't think Colby Covington's striking is nearly all that good. And I don't think it's nearly as dangerous as Khamzat Chimaev. So I think Khamzat Chimaev is able to put out a ridiculous amount of output. I think his power is going to be insane, especially at 185, not having to make that cut. You could probably say the same for Kamaru Usman. But again, all these things, the age difference, taking it on short notice, 185. He hasn't fought at 185, I don't think, ever in his career. I just think there's so many upsides on Khamzat Chimaev, who's the much younger guy, the much hungrier guy. And I got Khamzat Chimaev winning this fight, and I got him winning round 2 knockout. I'm going round 2 knockout. Usman probably walks around at 185 or greater. I will give you that. He's not going to really have to cut weight. I will say that. But again, it's really just more the fact that he's on the backside of his career. We're not getting the best version of Kamaru Usman that we've seen. I think the knee injuries that he's been battling could take effect here because now he's been going to war and actually losing fights, something he's not getting used to. And I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to put on an insane pace. And I don't think Kamaru Usman is going to be able to hold up. No, I don't think either guy is going to be cutting that much weight, if any. Usman's 6 feet, absolutely jacked. I'm sure he walks in at around 185, 190. Khamzat Chimaev got that tall, thin frame. So I'd be interested to see how it affects both guys. But I want to pick Kamaru Usman, man. I just think there's too many factors going against him here. And I'm not even saying skill for skill. If you give me a full fight camp, 5 rounds last year or 2 years ago, I'm taking Kamaru Usman. I really am, because I think I'm very curious to see who's going to win the exchanges with the wrestling. But I do believe that it's going to be Khamzat Chimaev, given the fact that I've now seen Leon Edwards go in there and take down Kamaru Usman with ease and control him in round 1 of that second fight. I think that's a big telling sign because no one was able to get Kamaru Usman down. That shows to me a decline in his game. And if anything, I think we're going to still see improvements from Khamzat Chimaev, who I'm assuming is just in the gym nonstop. Yeah, exactly. That is a fair point too, is for Kamaru Usman, you win this fight, that's amazing. You're getting the next title shot. Dana White already said that. If he loses, it's Khamzat Chimaev. Were we really expecting this? The line's now climbing. People are throwing money on the Khamzat Chimaev side. People expect Khamzat Chimaev to win. Yeah, me too. I'm still buying in on all the hype. I know the Gilbert Burns fight was super close. I went back and watched that one. But it is really crazy that Gilbert Burns did not get finished in that fight. Khamzat Chimaev had him deaded multiple times. And this dude is just getting better and better, man. That Kevin Holland win, like, who does that to Kevin Holland? That's ridiculous. I just want to see what happens when Khamzat Chimaev puts Kamaru Usman on his back. What is Usman going to do off his back if he got controlled by Leon Edwards for 3 minutes of that first round? And Khamzat's going to be actively looking for submissions, and he's going to be actively throwing ground and pound. And on the feet, he's probably going to be the aggressor. I just look to maybe see if Usman can pull like a round 3 crazy knockout because his power is insane. His striking did get better. You don't think Kamaru gets taken down? I think that's interesting. That's going to be the biggest question mark. I mean, who's going to win the wrestling exchanges? And if not, what's going to happen on the feet? This is Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman 2 and 1 all over again. This is just the same questions that we had. And on the feet, Kamaru Usman was slightly better. But I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to be better than Colby was on the feet and have more power and definitely have a more creative, versatile striking attack. But I'm going to move on here to the main event because we're running pretty long. That's what happens when Norton comes in. He's just got too many good points, and then I start talking for way too long. So what we have here in the main event, Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski. The rematch. I love it. Charles Oliveira gets injured. That's an absolute bummer. I was very much looking forward to that fight. Hopefully, we're able to see that matchup down the line, or just in general. I want to see Oliveira fight for the belt again against anybody. If he fights Volkanovski, that's amazing. But really, I mean, you don't really have to dig back too much on either of these guys. For Islam, his last fight was against Volkanovski. And for Alexander Volkanovski, his last fight was actually against Yair Rodriguez, where he just put on an absolute masterclass over Yair Rodriguez, where really for me with Volk, it's the wrestling that has just gotten so much better. And he's starting to be so much more aggressive with the way that he approaches fights. You see that against the Korean Zombie. Granted, it's the Korean Zombie out of his prime, a shell of himself, but he goes in there, 4 takedowns, ragdolls the Korean Zombie, gets the finish in round 4. His next fight after that against Max Holloway, the trilogy, the third fight, the first 2 are very close. Volk 50-45s Max Holloway. It's at this point where we believe that he is the pound-for-pound number 1 fighter. Then he fights Islam Makhachev, and not so much the case. Personally, I went back, I rewatched the fight, I scored it for Islam Makhachev. There were 2 clear rounds that I think you could give. No, I think it was 3 clear rounds that you could have given out, and then 2 kind of swing rounds. But overall, I think Islam won the fight. And I know people bitch and moan all the time saying Volk this, Volk that. Granted, Volk looked very good defensively when it came to the grappling, because we've never really seen anyone challenge Islam on the feet, on the ground, except maybe Arman Saryukian. But it was Islam Makhachev, 4 of 9 on his takedowns, 7.5 minutes of control. But that's still 5 takedowns that were stuffed by Alexander Volkanovski. There were positions that were reversed by Alexander Volkanovski. He was able to actually get 3 minutes of control time himself. So that's where I think a lot of people look at it and they say, oh, whoa, but well, Volk's wrestling was very good. Offensively, it was decent, but defensively, it was very good. And on the feet, he was outlanding Islam, especially in round 5. And I just think people kind of bought into the fact that Volk almost won. And they're saying that, well, this time around, it's going to be different. But why? Why is it going to be different this time around when the first fight was prime Volkanovski in his home territory, where Islam had to travel into enemy territory, and Islam won the fight? The judges scored it for Islam. Now you're getting a short notice replacement in Alexander Volkanovski, who has admittedly said he's coming off the couch. It came out today that he is 180 pounds. He's going to have to cut an insane amount of weight in 10 days? And now he's fighting in Abu Dhabi, not in his home country. He's going to Abu Dhabi, Islam's home territory. Why this time around is Volk going to win? When you have Islam, who's on a full fight camp as well, who is the much younger guy, who's still in his prime, Islam's going to win this fight. I know that's going to be hard to hear for a lot of people who are just blindly, I think, throwing money on Volkanovski, because it seems like that line continues to come down a little bit, where Islam's now only minus 260, Volk is plus 210. Islam's going to dominate. I think the bad parts about Islam was that I think he got a little bit discouraged because Volk was having some success with the wrestling defense, but I think Islam still just goes right back to it. Right back to it, because there were moments he was able to take the back. He was able to get the control time. On the feet, though, he needs to be more aggressive. He needs to throw a lot more activity because he let Volk kind of walk him down a couple times. Both guys were dropped in that fight, which I think is worth noting. Um, but I need Islam to land more strikes. He needs to be more active. He needs to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think he still just mixes in that wrestling and he's able to win this, no doubt, in my mind. And I could even see the finish happening. Yeah, Norton is still going for the Islam finish, live at large. Volk's neck only chink in the armor. And that's being generous, calling it a kink. Sorry, kink. Shouldn't have said that one the other way around. It's really not, but I got to try and find the smallest hole somewhere. Um, this is the year of main event upsets. Remember that. I agree, but I need more than that. I need more than it's Volk who deserves to be pound for pound, who should have won the first time. He didn't win the first time. I believe he lost the fight. All the judges thought he lost the fight. He's cutting a ridiculous amount of weight on short notice, going into enemy territory against Islam in his prime on a full fight camp. Why should Volk win? I don't understand it. This is not the correct time. We needed the rematch. This is not the right time to do it. We just got lucky. Exactly. I had 3-2 Islam as well. I had 3-2 Islam as well. Um, we wanted this fight to happen. We wanted the rematch. We wanted a full fight camp. We wanted both guys at their absolute best, and we're not getting that. And I think it favors Volk. I think it favors Islam in multiple different ways. So the official prediction is going to be Islam Makhachev. I am going to be looking at the under in this fight. I think a round 4 knockout is appropriate, but a submission is possible. He did take the back a couple times before. If anything, we have seen, Ortega was just moments away multiple times from being able to submit Volkanovski, and I think Islam might have some of those same tools in his bag. But overall, I'll be looking at the under. If I'm Alexander Volkanovski, I am just going balls to the wall. I'm not trying to go to decision. Don't go to the scorecards. Go crazy because you had some success on the feet. He has the reach edge. Volk has the reach edge. People forget that. And he was able to knock down Islam. That can kill the confidence of Islam. And I think he just goes for broke. Taking it on short notice in enemy territory, I think you're just going crazy. And then, yeah, if he's able to pull it off, then we would get a third fight, which is great. Volk has been saying he figured Islam out last fight, and I believe him. I think he saw holes in the ground game. I don't think there's many holes in that ground game. I don't think so. Islam is pound for pound best in the world right now. Probably has the best ground game in the entire UFC. Look what he did to Charles Oliveira when he said, "I'm going to finish this by submission" against the UFC's all-time leader in submission wins. Goes in there, submits him. Easy, easy work. Um, no, I think Islam's going to win this fight. I think he's going to finish him. I'm taking knockout. Submission wouldn't surprise me, but we'll see. So I'll just go down the list quick of all the official predictions. Islam, round 4 KO. Chimaev, round 2 KO. Ankalaev, decision. Aliskerov, round 2 submission. Saeed, decision. Mokaev, round 3 submission. Trevor Peak, round 1 knockout. David Basharat, decision. SD Dumas, hate that pick, round 2 submission. Mike Breeden, the lone wolf underdog on my card, gets the win by decision, cashes out big time. Nathaniel Wood by decision, Dudakova round 2 submission, and Magomedov making his UFC debut gets a round 1 knockout. It's a little square, but I love it. This is one of the chalkiest cards you're ever going to see. That's just how I see it. I call it as I see it. I'm not forcing any underdog picks, but I do have one on the card that I like. Outside of that, it's all chalk. So, real quick, couple of things. Make sure to check out the Patreon. I have an all-inclusive tool where you have fight predictions, confidence levels, fight notes, best bets on the card, early line movement tracker. I got a DFS guy with content in there, post weigh-in show notes, all these great things in the Patreon. Make sure to check it out. And then also this week, Thursday, my DFS guy is doing a video. Post the weigh-in show video is coming on Friday. Make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button if you like what you heard. And I guess we will see you guys next time. Norton MMA, thank you. Get in my DMs. We got to catch up because there's a lot going on in life, I'm sure. Oh, all right. Yes, I will try to go live more often at an appropriate time for you because I need you in the comments, my guy. I need you there. All right. Check out the timestamps if you want to see all the specific matchups. I'll see you next time.